My name is Thea Wallace. I'm 33 years old, and 4 months ago, my parents filed a petition in county court to declare me mentally incompetent, to take legal control of my life, my money, and everything I own. Picture this: a courtroom, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My father sitting next to an expensive attorney, back straight, jaw tight, the same posture he used at the head of our dinner table for 30 years. My mother dabbing her eyes with a cloth handkerchief, performing grief like she was born for it. Their lawyer smirking at me across the aisle like this was already over. They wanted my bank account, my car, my apartment. They called me immature, incapable, unfit to manage my own affairs. They had no idea what I actually had. And there was one thing, just one, that Gerald Wallace, the man who controlled everything and everyone in our family for 3 decades, never once bothered to check. The public records at the very office where his daughter worked every single day. Before I tell you what happened next, if this story resonates with you, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. Now let me take you back 4 months, to the evening I opened my mailbox and found an envelope from the County Superior Court. It was a Tuesday in November. I remember because Tuesdays were my slow cooker nights. Come home, check the pot, eat something warm at my little Formica table, read for an hour, go to bed. That was my life. Predictable, quiet, mine. My apartment was a 450-square-foot studio on the second floor of a walk-up in a middle-class neighborhood where nobody bothered anybody. The faucet dripped if you didn't twist it hard enough. The radiator clanked at 2 a.m. The rent was $810 a month, and I'd never missed a payment in 7 years. I sorted through the mail on the kitchen counter, electric bill, grocery circular. And then, a white envelope, heavier than the others, with the return address of the County Superior Court printed in the upper left corner. I opened it standing up. Petition for appointment of conservator. Petitioner: Gerald R. Wallace and Donna M. Wallace. Respondent: Thea L. Wallace. Basis: respondent lacks capacity for self-care and financial management. My hands shook. Not because I was afraid of the court. I'd worked in a courthouse my entire adult career. I knew what a conservatorship petition looked like. I'd filed hundreds of them into archive boxes. What made my hands shake was the realization that my own parents had walked into a lawyer's office, sat down, and said the words out loud. Our daughter cannot take care of herself. Give us control. I set the letter down on the Formica, right next to the little notebook I kept in my kitchen drawer, the one with 11 years of investment records written in my own handwriting, in neat columns, updated every quarter. My father always said his daughter didn't know how to do anything except sort paper. He was right about the paper part. He was just wrong about the rest. And the money they thought I had? And the money I actually had? Those were 2 numbers separated by a distance Gerald Wallace could not have imagined in his worst nightmare. To understand what happened in that courtroom, you need to understand Gerald Wallace. My father was the kind of man who sat at the head of every table, literally. Thanksgiving, Christmas, a random Wednesday dinner, didn't matter. Head of the table, back straight, voice loud enough to fill whatever room he was in and leave no space for anyone else. If my mother started a sentence, he'd finish it. If I offered an opinion, he'd wave his hand like he was swatting a fly. What do girls know about that? For 20-some years, he ran Wallace & Sons Construction, a mid-size operation, 15 crew members, subcontracts on commercial builds around the county. He was proud of it the way some men are proud of things that sit on their surface, loudly, constantly, and in a way that dared you to question it. He drove a silver Lexus SUV that gleamed in the driveway of our 4-bedroom house, leased, not owned, though he never volunteered that detail. He wore a Rolex on his left wrist, also not what it appeared to be, but you'd need a jeweler's loupe to know that. And Gerald wasn't the kind of man who let people get that close. My mother, Donna, was a different kind of weapon. She didn't bark orders. She cried. She sighed. She called you at 7 a.m. to say, "I just worry about you, sweetheart," in a voice that made you feel like you'd committed a crime by not calling her first. And if you said no to something, anything, she'd phone every aunt, cousin, and church friend within a 50-mile radius and tell them you were troubled, ungrateful, cold. Together, they were a closed system. Gerald commanded, Donna enforced through guilt, and anyone who pushed back got rewritten as the problem. What I didn't know yet, what nobody outside a bankruptcy court knew, was that Wallace and Sons Construction had filed Chapter 7 6 months before that petition landed in my mailbox. The Lexus was 3 months behind on lease payments. The 4-bedroom house had a foreclosure notice taped to the inside of a kitchen cabinet. Gerald Wallace was drowning, and he needed a life raft he could control. People will ask, people always ask, why didn't you just cut them off years ago? It's a fair question, and the answer has 3 parts. The first was money. When I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in information science and a job at the county records office that paid $31,000 a year, I had $47,000 in student loans. My father had co-signed them, and he reminded me of that fact the way some people remind you of the weather, constantly, casually, and with just enough threat underneath. You walk away from this family, Thea, and I call the bank. You understand me? I co-signed. I can make one phone call. He couldn't, actually. That's not how co-signed loans work. But I was 22, and I didn't know that yet. I paid off every cent of that loan by the time I was 31. I clicked Confirm Final Payment, sitting in my Honda Civic in the parking lot of a grocery store, and I cried for 20 minutes. Not from sadness, because for the first time in 9 years, Gerald Wallace had nothing of mine in his hands. He just didn't know that yet. The second reason was Ethan, my little brother, 13 years younger, quiet, smart, the kind of kid who read entire encyclopedias on his phone and didn't tell anyone. He lived under Gerald's roof. If I walked away, Gerald would punish Ethan for it, pull his college fund, kick him out, use him to hurt me, or hurt him to remind me. I couldn't risk that. Ethan turned 20 last year. He's in his second year of college on a merit scholarship he earned himself. He's not a hostage anymore. The third reason was a piece of paper. When I was 24, I signed a limited power of attorney giving my father authority to handle one insurance claim on my car. A small thing. I didn't read the fine print carefully enough. I trusted him, because he was my father, and I was 24 and still believed that word meant something. Gerald kept the original. I revoked it 3 years later with a notarized written revocation. But Gerald filed that original POA with his conservatorship petition as if it were still active, as if I had voluntarily given him control once before and might need it given again. He hid the revocation. He lied to the court. I didn't know that part yet either, not until discovery. The person who works in archives understands something most people don't. The moment you open a file matters just as much as what's inside it. I didn't cut ties immediately. I waited. I prepared. And when all 3 chains broke, the loan, Ethan's dependents, the revoked POA, Gerald lost every piece of leverage he had. So he escalated to a courtroom. And that was his mistake. Because you can walk away from a phone call, but you can't walk away from a court case. He forced me into a fight I couldn't avoid. So I prepared for the only fight I'd ever need. Here's the thing about being an archivist that nobody tells you. You spend your days surrounded by the financial anatomy of an entire county: property deeds, tax lien certificates, foreclosure filings, trust transfers, probate records, thousands of them, year after year, passing through your hands. Most people in my office processed them and moved on. I processed them and took notes. By 23, I'd started reading about index fund investing, nothing exotic, nothing risky. The Bogle method. Buy the total market, keep costs low, don't touch it, let compound interest do what compound interest does. I opened a Vanguard account with my first $400 and set up automatic contributions, every month, without fail. I lived on less than $1,200 a month, studio apartment, rice and beans, library books, a Honda Civic I bought used for $6,000 cash, and everything else went in. By 25, I noticed something at work. Tax lien properties. Homes that went to auction because the owners owed back taxes, sometimes just a few $1,000s. I watched the records come through. A 2-bedroom house in the East End, purchased at tax lien auction for $23,000. Previous assessed value, $110,000. I did the math on a napkin during lunch. I bought that house. Spent weekends patching drywall, painting walls, replacing faucets with YouTube tutorials, and a borrowed toolkit. Rented it for $1,100 a month to a young couple who kept it cleaner than I'd left it. Then I bought another. Then a third. My colleague Margaret Holt, 61, retired CPA, now working part-time in our office because she said retirement was boring and overrated, became something between a mentor and a guardian angel. She taught me to read financial statements the way a surgeon reads an MRI. She reviewed my tax filings. She notarized my documents. She never once told me I was crazy for living in a studio while owning 3 rental properties. Nobody at work knew. I didn't drive a new car. I didn't wear expensive clothes. My desk had a Folgers mug and a county-issued monitor, and if you glanced at it, you'd see a records management dashboard and nothing else. You wouldn't see the second tab I kept open on my personal laptop at home, a Vanguard portfolio that had been compounding for 11 years. Margaret was the only person who knew I had more than a studio apartment to my name. But even Margaret didn't know the exact number, not until the court ordered me to disclose it. After I refused to sign the voluntary conservatorship papers, Gerald shifted tactics. I'll give my father this much. When he wanted something, he didn't waste time being subtle. He launched a campaign, not against an enemy or a competitor, but against his own daughter, with the efficiency of a man who'd spent 3 decades managing construction crews and telling everyone around him what to do. Within a week of my refusal, he'd made calls. My Aunt Barbara, his older sister, the one who always deferred to him, called me on a Thursday evening with her voice pitched in that careful register people use when they think someone might be fragile. "Honey, your dad says you've been struggling. You know you can talk to me, right?" My cousin Patrick sent a text. "Hey, heard things are rough. Let me know if you need anything." He'd never texted me in his life. Donna's contribution was more surgical. She posted on Facebook, no names, but the kind of post where everyone in the family knew exactly who she meant. When your child refuses help, all a mother can do is pray. Some battles you can't fight alone. 87 reactions, 31 comments. Every one of them assuring her she was a wonderful mother. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed 14 times in one day. Missed calls from numbers I recognized and numbers I didn't. Gerald was building a narrative. Thea is unstable. Thea is isolated. Thea needs intervention, and distributing it to everyone who might one day sit in a witness chair. And then the text from Gerald himself started. Late at night. Blunt. "You think you're smarter than your father? A girl with no husband, no life, living in a box? You'll regret this, Thea." I didn't delete those texts. I screenshotted every single one, time-stamped, and saved them in a folder labeled GW on a flash drive I kept in my desk drawer at work. Something else arrived that week, something quieter, more dangerous. My Aunt Barbara called a second time, and this time her voice wasn't just concerned, it was rehearsed. "Sweetheart, your father mentioned you might be dealing with depression, serious depression. He wants to make sure you're getting help." Gerald wasn't just calling relatives, he was scripting them. Then the court did something Gerald didn't expect to work in my favor. As part of the standard conservatorship process, the judge issued an order requiring both parties to submit a full financial disclosure, a detailed inventory of assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. The kind of paperwork that, for most people, is tedious and invasive. For me, it was an invitation. I sat at my Formica table that evening and read the court order twice. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I smiled. Genuinely. The kind of smile that starts behind your eyes before it reaches your mouth. They want the court to look at my finances? Fine. Let the court look. I pulled the black moleskin notebook from my kitchen drawer, the one with the cracked spine from 11 years of use, every page filled with my handwriting in neat columns. Dates, account numbers, purchase prices, rental income, quarterly Vanguard statements. I called Margaret at 8:30 that night. She picked up on the second ring. Margaret always picked up on the second ring, a habit she said came from 30 years in accounting. You never let a client wait, and you never let a ringing phone go to 4. "Margaret, I need your help. Can you help me compile everything into a formal disclosure? All of it." A pause. Then, "All of it?" "Everything." "Thea," another pause. "This is going to be one hell of a document." I know. I'd never totaled it all in one place before. 11 years of index fund contributions, compound growth, reinvested dividends. 3 rental properties with equity and income streams. Savings. The Honda Civic, worth about $4,000 on a good day. The studio apartment lease. When Margaret and I finished the spreadsheet 3 days later, we sat across from each other at her kitchen table and stared at the number at the bottom of the page. Margaret took off her reading glasses, set them on the table and said, "Your father has absolutely no idea, does he?" "No," I said. "He doesn't." I honestly felt a little stunned myself. I'd been so focused on the process, save, invest, maintain, repeat, that I'd never stepped back to see the full picture. Numbers compound quietly. They don't announce themselves. They just grow, in the dark, like roots under concrete. While I was compiling the truth, Gerald was manufacturing a lie. Through the discovery process, where both sides exchange evidence before a hearing, I received copies of what Gerald's attorney, Craig Delmore, had submitted to the court on my parents' behalf. Craig Delmore was 50, polished, and specialized in conservatorship and elder law. He had a reputation in the county for winning 12 consecutive conservatorship cases without a loss, mostly involving elderly clients whose families wanted control of their estates. He wore tailored suits, carried a Mont Blanc pen, and had the smooth confidence of a man who'd never been surprised in a courtroom. He charged $400 an hour, and Gerald was paying him with borrowed money Gerald couldn't afford, on a bet that he'd recover it from me tenfold. The evidence package contained 3 items. First, sworn affidavits from Gerald and Donna stating that I lived in isolation, refused to maintain social relationships, and demonstrated an inability to manage basic life responsibilities. Lies, wrapped in legal language and notarized with a straight face. Second, letters from my Aunt Barbara and a former neighbor named Tom Greer expressing concern about my well-being. Barbara's letter was vague and emotional. Tom's was almost comically thin. He'd lived 3 houses down from my parents and hadn't spoken to me in 6 years. Gerald had clearly coached both of them. Third, and this was the one that made my chest tighten, a psychological evaluation authored by a Dr. Howard Phelps. The report concluded that I exhibited signs of social withdrawal, executive dysfunction, and impaired financial judgment. I read it twice. Then I checked the header. Dr. Phelps had never met me, never examined me, never spoken to me. The report was based entirely on descriptions provided by family members. A psychological evaluation of a person the doctor had never seen. I set the document down and picked up my phone. Rachel Pemberton, the attorney I'd hired 3 days earlier, answered on the first ring. "Rachel, the psych report. The doctor never examined me." "I saw it. That's not just unethical." "No," Rachel said. "It's potentially fraud upon the court, and it's exactly what we're going to use." I should tell you how I found Rachel Pemberton. 2 days after receiving the court summons, I sat at the county library, not at home, not at work, somewhere nobody would see my screen, and searched for attorneys who specialized in fighting abusive conservatorships. There weren't many. It's a narrow area of law, the kind most people never think about until it's too late. Rachel's name came up in a local newspaper article about conservatorship reform. She'd represented 3 clients whose families had tried to use the system to seize control of their finances. She'd won all 3. Her office was small, a converted storefront on a side street downtown, the kind of place you'd walk past without noticing. Bookshelves floor to ceiling, a JD from the State University framed on the wall, and a cup of tea on her desk that had clearly gone cold hours ago. She was 41, direct, and had the kind of calm that suggested she'd sat across from worse stories than mine. "Tell me what they want," she said. "Everything. My bank account, my car, my apartment. And what do you actually have?" I set the folder on her desk. Not the court folder, my folder. The one Margaret and I had compiled. Rachel opened it. She turned pages slowly. I watched her eyes. She didn't react for about 30 seconds. Then she looked up. "Your parents don't know about any of this?" "My father never once asked me how much I earn. He assumed he already knew the answer." Rachel closed the folder and leaned back. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to petition the court to appoint an independent investigator, someone who'll actually meet you, instead of writing a report based on your father's script. Second, We prepare the asset disclosure exactly as the court ordered. Third, and this is important, we don't show a single card until the hearing. She paused. There's one more thing. Pull your credit report. Tonight. All 3 bureaus. Don't wait. Why? Because in my experience, when a parent files for conservatorship over a financially independent adult child, it's sometimes not the first time they've crossed a line. I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. Gerald, meanwhile, wasn't waiting for the courtroom. He was building his case in the court of public opinion. He told the men's group at his Methodist church that his eldest child was struggling mentally. He didn't say conservatorship, he said intervention, which sounded softer, nobler, like something a loving father would do. He said he and Donna were stepping in before it's too late. 3 men offered to pray with him. One shook his hand and said, "You're doing the right thing, Gerald." Donna amplified the message with surgical precision. She called my father's business associates, the ones who hadn't yet heard about the bankruptcy, and mentioned, almost offhandedly, that they were dealing with a family health situation. She called neighbors. She called the wife of my landlord's real estate agent. She reached further and further into every circle that might one day overlap with mine. The effects hit me at work on a Thursday morning. I was at my desk, processing a batch of property transfers, when my supervisor stopped by and asked if we could step into the conference room for a quick chat. She was kind about it. She said she'd received a call, she wouldn't say from whom, asking about my mental health status and whether it was affecting my work performance. "I'm required to ask," she said, not unkindly. "Is there anything going on that you'd like HR to know about?" I looked at her. "My parents are filing a petition I intend to fight. It has no merit. My work has not been affected, and it won't be." She nodded, made a note, and let me go. But the damage was in the air. 2 colleagues glanced at me differently in the hallway. Someone had seen Donna's Facebook post. Then came the landlord call. Gerald had contacted my building's management office expressing concern about his daughter's ability to maintain her living situation. My landlord, a decent man who'd never had a complaint about me, called to ask if everything was all right. He didn't say he wouldn't renew my lease. He just said he was checking in. Gerald was trying to dismantle my life from the outside in. Employer, housing, social circle, brick by brick. And he thought he was doing it to someone who had nothing. No resources, no allies, no recourse. That night, I followed Rachel's advice and pulled my credit report from all 3 bureaus. I sat at my kitchen table with the laptop open and a glass of water I never touched. The first page loaded, and everything looked normal. My credit cards, my auto insurance, my rental history. Clean, organized, mine. Then I scrolled down. 2 credit card accounts I had never opened. One Visa, one MasterCard, both issued 14 and 11 months prior. Combined outstanding balance, $28,400. Billing addresses I didn't recognize, but one of them matched a PO, box Gerald had used for his business. I kept scrolling. A home equity line of credit, HELOC, drawn against my second rental property, $85,000, opened 9 months ago. The application bore my name, my social security number, and a signature that wasn't mine. I sat very still for a long time. My parents hadn't just filed a conservatorship petition to gain control of my finances. They'd already been inside my finances, without my knowledge, without my consent, using information they'd obtained from the limited power of attorney I'd revoked 3 years ago. Gerald had kept the original, presented it as active, and used it to open lines of credit in my daughter's name to feed a bankruptcy he hadn't told anyone about. $341,600. That was the total. Credit cards, plus the HELOC, plus interest and fees. Taken from me. By my parents. I called Rachel at 11:15 at night. "I found it," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. 2 fraudulent credit cards, a HELOC with a forged signature, total exposure over $340,000. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then, "This is identity theft, Thea. And this is exactly why they need the conservatorship, to retroactively legalize what they've already done illegally. What do? We could report it to the police right now." "No." I surprised myself with how fast the word came out. "Not yet. I want it all to come out at once, in the hearing, in front of the judge, in front of their lawyer, in front of my father. Rachel paused. You understand the risk? If we wait, I understand the risk. I also understand my father. He needs to hear it read out loud, on the record, in a room he can't leave. That's the only language he's ever respected. Okay, Rachel said. Then we commission a forensic audit. Independent CPA firm, documented, certified, admissible. And we attach it to your asset disclosure as a supplemental exhibit. Do it! I hung up and sat in the dark kitchen for a while. The faucet dripped, the radiator clanked. And somewhere across town, in a 4-bedroom house with a foreclosure notice hidden inside a cabinet, Gerald Wallace was sleeping soundly, confident that his plan was working. 3 weeks before the hearing, a woman named Linda Marsh came to my apartment. She was the court-appointed investigator, 55, gray-haired and professionally neutral in that way that makes you want to be completely honest because you can tell she's seen every version of dishonesty there is. The court had assigned her to assess whether I was, in fact, incapable of managing my own life. She stood in my doorway and took in the studio, 450 square feet, clean, organized, bed made, dishes washed, a small bookshelf against the wall, bills in a folder on the counter, all paid, all current. May I come in? Of course. She stayed for 90 minutes. She asked about my job, my daily routine, my social life, my finances, general questions, careful ones, designed to surface confusion or gaps. I answered each one plainly. I told her about the records office, about my reading habits, about the recipes I cooked on weekday evenings and the walks I took on Sunday mornings. She took notes. She asked about my parents. They believe I can't manage my life, I said. I disagree. Why do you think they filed this petition? I looked at her directly. You'll have to ask them that. Linda also met with Gerald and Donna. Rachel told me afterward what she'd been told. Gerald had dominated the meeting, spoken over Donna multiple times, and emphasized, with visible frustration, that I lived in a studio, drove an old car, had no husband, and no children. 33 years old, he'd reportedly said, leaning forward, jabbing a finger at the table. Living in a box. No future. That's normal to you? Donna had cried. Of course she had. Linda's report would be submitted to the court before the hearing. I didn't know what she'd written, but when she left my apartment, she paused at the door and glanced at my bookshelf, 3 rows deep, half financial, half literary, and then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Thank you, Thea. I have what I need. And she smiled, very slightly. 3 days before the hearing, 11:47 at night. My phone lit up on the nightstand. Dad. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, the part that had been waiting 11 years for this conversation, picked up. Thea. His voice was controlled, the way it got when he wanted you to feel the weight of his authority without raising his volume. Listen to me. You need to withdraw your objection. Sign the voluntary conservatorship. Your mother is sick over this. I'm carrying debt you can't imagine. You're our daughter. You have an obligation. Dad, I've already said no. I'll say it again in court. A crack in the control. You think you can challenge me? In front of a judge? You think anyone is going to take your side? You're a girl who sorts paper in a basement, Thea. That's all you've ever been. I let the silence hold for a beat. 2, 3. You'll see what the girl who sorts paper can do. Good night, Dad. I hung up, set the phone face down on the nightstand, sat in the dark. On my kitchen table, the completed disclosure file waited. 40 pages, tabbed in yellow, every number verified, every document notarized. Rachel had confirmed. The forensic audit was done. The independent CPA firm had traced every unauthorized transaction, documented the forged HELOC signature, identified the fraudulent credit card applications, and tied them directly to Gerald and Donna Wallace. Everything was ready. The hearing was Tuesday morning. 72 hours. I looked at the ceiling for a long time. The streetlight outside threw a pale rectangle across the plaster. I wasn't afraid, not the way I'd been afraid at 22 with a co-signed loan hanging over my head. This was different. This was the kind of stillness that comes before you step into something you can't undo. 3 days. 3 days, and it would be over, one way or another. If you're listening right now and you know what it's like to lie awake at night because the people who were supposed to protect you are the same ones threatening to take everything, then this story is for you. And what comes next is the part where I almost broke. If you want to keep going, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything, but only if this story means something to you. Let me take you to Tuesday morning. Tuesday, 8:45 a.m., County Superior Court, Department 7. I arrived early because I've never been late to anything in my life, and I wasn't about to start with the hearing that would determine whether I kept control of my own existence. I wore a light blue button-up shirt, dark slacks, flat shoes. No jewelry except a plain wristwatch. No makeup beyond moisturizer and a swipe of lip balm. I looked exactly like what I was, a county records employee on her day off. Nothing more, nothing to prove. The courtroom was smaller than people imagine courtrooms to be. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly in the ceiling, 2 tables facing the bench, a gallery with about 20 seats, mostly empty. Gerald and Donna were already there. My father sat on the left side in a charcoal gray suit I'd never seen before, new or borrowed or bought on a credit card he couldn't pay. His posture was military straight. Donna sat beside him in a navy blue dress, clutching a cloth handkerchief like a prop in a stage play. Between them, Craig Delmore had his laptop open and his Mont Blanc pen uncapped, silver cufflinks catching the overhead light. He looked like a man who'd already written his closing statement. Behind them, Aunt Barbara in the front row of the gallery, hands folded in her lap, and Tom Greer, the former neighbor, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I walked to the right side table and sat down next to Rachel Pemberton. Rachel wore a dark blazer, no accessories, her briefcase closed. She didn't look at the other side. She didn't need to. On our table, one clear plastic folder, yellow tabs, 40 pages. I glanced across the room. Gerald's fingers were tapping the table, a slow, rhythmic drumming I'd known since childhood. He always did that when he felt certain, when he believed the outcome was already decided. I'd watched those fingers tap for 33 years. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Robert Callahan took the bench. 58, silver-haired, known for 2 things, fairness and a zero-tolerance policy for wasting his time. In the matter of Wallace versus Wallace, the clerk announced, petition for appointment of conservator. It had begun. Craig Delmore stood first. He buttoned his jacket with one hand, a practiced, fluid motion, and addressed the bench with the measured confidence of a man who knew exactly how many times he'd won. Your Honor, we are here today out of genuine concern for the well-being of Thea Wallace, 33 years of age. Ms. Wallace lives alone in a studio apartment, maintains minimal social contact, earns a modest income as a file clerk at the county records office, and has shown, over a sustained period, an inability to establish or maintain the kind of personal and professional life that reflects sound judgment and self-sufficiency. He paused for effect, just long enough. Her parents, Gerald and Donna Wallace, are not here as adversaries. They are here as parents. Concerned parents who have watched their daughter withdraw from family, from community, from opportunity, and who believe, sincerely, that a conservatorship is the most loving intervention they can offer. He introduced the affidavits. Gerald's, clinical, controlled, a portrait of fatherly worry. Donna's, emotional, tearful, a mother's anguish. He submitted the letters from Barbara and Tom Greer. We're just worried about her. She's so isolated. It's not normal. Then he presented Dr. Phelps' report. He held it up with both hands, let the judge see the official-looking header. A qualified psychological assessment, Your Honor, conducted by Dr. Howard Phelps, concluding that Ms. Wallace exhibits markers consistent with impaired executive function and diminished capacity for self-directed financial management. Donna was crying softly now, dabbing her eyes at measured intervals. Gerald sat rigid, his expression arranged into something that was meant to look like pain, but looked, to anyone who knew him, exactly like control. Craig Delmore returned to his seat, uncapped his Mont Blanc, and made a note. He glanced at me across the aisle, briefly, dismissively, the way you glance at something that's already been settled. She's a file clerk, that glance said. She doesn't have anything. I sat through all of it. Every word. Incapable. Isolated. Unable to manage. Donna's performance with the handkerchief, Barbara's rehearsed concern, Tom Greer's vague, uncomfortable testimony about how I didn't come outside much when I was living 3 doors down from him, 6 years ago, when I was 27 and spending every weekend renovating a house he didn't know I owned. I sat through Craig Delmore describing my life as evidence of failure: a studio apartment, an old car, a county job, a woman alone. Under the table, my hands were fists. Not in anger, in restraint. 11 years of restraint, compressed into a single morning. Rachel placed her hand lightly on my forearm. "Not yet," she murmured without moving her lips. "Almost." I looked across the aisle at my father. He wasn't watching Delmore or the judge. He was watching me. And in his eyes, I saw something I'd been seeing since I was old enough to understand it. Certainty. Not that he was right. Gerald never questioned whether he was right. Certainty that the world was organized the way he'd always believed it was. That daughters stayed small. That authority always won. That the person who spoke loudest owned the room. He didn't blink. Neither did I. I lowered my head for 3 seconds, breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth. Then I straightened my back, placed both palms flat on the table, and looked forward. My father taught me something he never intended to teach. When you've been underestimated your entire life, you learn to prepare for everything, because you know no one will hand you a second chance. The folder sat between Rachel and me on the table. Yellow tabs, 40 pages, every number verified. Gerald had brought a narrative. I had brought the receipts. Judge Callahan turned to our side. "Ms. Pemberton, does the respondent wish to present a response?" Rachel stood, buttoned her blazer. "Yes, Your Honor, and we'd like to begin with the report of the court-appointed investigator." Rachel didn't rush, she didn't perform. She simply asked the court to read the report submitted by Linda Marsh, the independent court investigator. The clerk opened the sealed document and read the summary into the record. The court investigator conducted a 90-minute in-person evaluation of the respondent at her residence. Respondent demonstrated full cognitive capacity, including clear articulation of financial responsibilities, consistent employment history, organized living conditions, and no clinical indicators of impaired judgment or executive dysfunction. Gerald uncrossed his legs, crossed them again. The investigator further notes that the petitioner's characterization of respondent as isolated and unable to maintain social relationships is inconsistent with respondent's stable 11-year employment record, organized home environment, and articulate self-presentation during evaluation. Craig Delmore stopped writing. His Mont Blanc hovered above his legal pad. Additionally, the psychological evaluation submitted by petitioners was authored by Dr. Howard Phelps, who has no documented record of direct clinical examination of the respondent. The evaluation appears to have been prepared solely from descriptions provided by family members, which raises significant ethical and evidentiary concerns. The courtroom was quiet, the kind of quiet that has texture, where you can feel the air change. Judge Callahan looked up from his copy of the report. He looked at Craig Delmore, then at Gerald, then at the report again. "Counselor Delmore," the judge said, his voice flat and precise, "were you aware that Dr. Phelps did not conduct a direct examination of the respondent?" Craig Delmore opened his mouth, closed it, and then said, "Your Honor, Dr. Phelps is a licensed—" "That wasn't my question. I was under the impression that an evaluation had been—" "We'll return to that." The judge made a note. "Ms. Pemberton, please continue." Donna's handkerchief had stopped moving. Aunt Barbara's hands were no longer folded. They were gripping each other. And Gerald's fingers had stopped tapping the table. For the first time in the hearing, the room wasn't moving in his direction. Rachel let the silence land. Then she spoke. "Your Honor, we would also like to submit the respondent's court-ordered asset disclosure, prepared in full compliance with the court's directive and verified by an independent appraiser. In addition, we have attached a supplemental document that we believe is directly relevant to the true motivation behind this petition." She handed the folder to the bailiff. It was the same clear plastic folder that had been sitting on our table since 8:45 that morning. Yellow tabs, 40 pages. The bailiff carried it to the bench. Judge Callahan accepted it without expression and began to page through it. He paused, flipped back, read again. Across the aisle, Craig Delmore watched the folder change hands with a furrowed brow. He leaned toward Gerald and whispered something. Gerald shook his head, dismissive, impatient. I could see his lips move. She doesn't have anything. Rachel addressed the court. Your Honor, we respectfully request that the court officer read the asset inventory into the record, as is standard in contested conservatorship proceedings. Judge Callahan nodded. Proceed. The bailiff, a man in his 50s, with the kind of measured baritone that made everything sound like a verdict, opened the folder to the first tabbed section. I looked at Gerald one last time before it started. He was sitting back in his chair now, legs crossed, one hand resting on the table, composed, certain, still certain. He thought this was a formality. The financial profile of a 33-year-old woman who lived in a studio apartment and drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The bailiff cleared his throat. But before I tell you what was in that folder, I need to take you back to the night before the hearing. 9:43 p.m. My phone rang. Not Gerald, not Donna. A number from Ethan's area code, his university dorm. Thea. My brother's voice, low and tight, the way he sounds when he's trying to be calm about something he's not calm about at all. I know about the hearing tomorrow. Ethan, I bought a bus ticket. I'll be at the courthouse by 8. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. A pause. Background noise. The muffled sound of a dormitory hallway, someone's music through a wall. Thea, listen, I overheard Dad on the phone with his lawyer last week. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich and he was in the garage with the door half open and he didn't know I was there. My chest tightened. He said, these are his exact words, the girl's probably got 30-40 grand in the bank. That's enough to cover a few months of payments. Once the conservatorship goes through, I sell her car and the apartment lease and we restructure. Ethan's voice hardened. He called you the girl, Thea, not your name, the girl. And then he told his lawyer, just get me the signature. She's not going to fight it. She doesn't have it in her. I pressed my palm flat against the kitchen table. The wood grain was cool under my fingers. And there's something else, Ethan said. I recorded it, the whole conversation, 18 minutes. Ethan, before you say anything, I checked. Our state is a one-party consent state. I was in the room. It's legal. I closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt something other than pressure. I felt not alone. You've been protecting me since I was 7 years old, Ethan said. I'm 20 now. It's my turn. 6:15 a.m., the morning of the hearing, gray light through the bathroom window. I stood in front of the mirror, button-up shirt half done, and looked myself in the eyes. No pep talk, no dramatic internal monologue. Just a woman getting dressed for the most important day of her adult life. My phone buzzed. Rachel. Order of operations, she said, all business. First, Linda Marsh's report. We established that you're competent and that their psychological evaluation is garbage. Second, the asset inventory. We show the court that not only are you competent, you've been building wealth independently for over a decade. Third, she paused. Third is the forensic audit, the identity theft, the HELOC, the credit cards. That's the one they're not expecting. That's the one nobody's expecting. When item 3 hits the record, I need you to do exactly one thing, Thea. Stay seated, stay silent, let the documents talk. I've been letting documents do the talking my whole career. A pause. I thought I heard Rachel almost laugh. Fair point. One last thing, your brother, he's coming? He's on a bus right now. Good. If we need his testimony, it corroborates motive. Gerald on recording, saying he wants your money to cover his debts. That's not a concerned father seeking guardianship. That's financial predation with extra steps. Understood. See you at 8:30. I finished buttoning my shirt, ran a hand through my hair, moisturizer, lip balm, flat shoes. That was it. I picked up the folder, 40 pages, yellow tabs, and slid it into my bag next to a bottle of water. I drove the Honda Civic to the courthouse, red light at the intersection of Lincoln and 5th. I stopped, glanced at the passenger seat, the folder, the water bottle, my entire case in a clear plastic binder that cost $2 at the office supply store. Green light. I drove. back in the courtroom. The bailiff held the folder open, cleared his throat, and began. Asset item 1. His baritone was level, almost monotone, the voice of a man who'd read thousands of documents without commentary. Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund and associated brokerage accounts held solely in the name of Thea L. Wallace. Verified balance as of October 31st, $1,214,812. The courtroom didn't gasp. That only happens in movies. What happened was worse, more visceral. A silence so dense it had mass. The bailiff's voice hung in the air like smoke, and nobody moved. Craig Delmore's pen touched his legal pad but didn't write. Donna's handkerchief fell from her fingers onto her lap. Gerald leaned forward, slowly, like a man who'd misheard something and was angling his ear to catch the correction. Judge Callahan looked from the document to me, then to Gerald, then back to the document. His expression didn't change, but his posture shifted, straightened, the way it does when a judge realizes the case he's hearing is not the case he was told about. Gerald turned to Craig Delmore. I heard it. The entire courtroom heard it, because Gerald never learned how to whisper. That's not... There's a mistake. Where would she? She's a file clerk. Check the number. That can't be right. Craig Delmore didn't check the number. He stared at the document in the judge's hand, and for the first time since the hearing began, his Mont Blanc pen was capped. Rachel sat motionless beside me. I sat motionless beside her. We'd agreed. Say nothing. Let the numbers speak. The bailiff looked to the judge. Judge Callahan nodded. Continue. Asset item 2. The bailiff turned the page. 3 residential rental properties, held solely in the name of Thea L. Wallace. He listed them one by one. Addresses, purchase dates, current appraised values, each verified by an independent property assessor. A 2-bedroom on Elm Court, purchased at a tax lien auction 8 years ago for $23,000. Current value $185,000. A 3-bedroom on Prospect Avenue, purchased 5 years ago for $61,000. Current value $340,000. A duplex on Cedar Lane, purchased 3 years ago for $92,000. Current value $365,000. Total appraised real estate value $890,000. Combined annual rental income $39,600. Craig Delmore closed his laptop, placed both hands flat on the table. He didn't look at Gerald. He didn't look at anyone. He was doing math, not financial math, but professional math, the kind where you calculate how deep a hole your client has dug and whether it's too late to climb out. Gerald's face was a color I'd never seen on him before, not red from anger, not the forced composure of authority. Something between disbelief and vertigo. His daughter, the one he'd called a file clerk, the one who lived in a box, the one who couldn't manage her own life, owned 3 houses. He'd lost his. She owned 3. Donna was no longer crying. She was staring at the back of Gerald's head with an expression that, if you didn't know her, might have looked like shock. But I knew her. That was the face Donna made when she was recalculating, when the script she'd prepared was no longer useful and she needed a new one. Aunt Barbara, in the gallery, had unfolded her arms and was sitting with her palms flat on her thighs, absolutely still. Tom Greer was looking at the exit door. Judge Callahan said, "Proceed." The bailiff turned to the 3rd tab. He began. Asset item 3. Supplemental document. Independent forensic audit report, prepared by Hargrove and Dunn, certified public accountants. He read steadily, without inflection, the way a man reads something that doesn't need drama because the facts provide it. Findings. Between January of the preceding year and September of the current year, Gerald R. Wallace and Donna M. Wallace executed unauthorized financial transactions totaling $341,600 using the personal identifying information of respondent Thea L. Wallace. He continued. Transactions include 2 credit card accounts opened via identity fraud, combined balance $28,400. 1 home equity line of credit in the amount of $85,000, obtained using a revoked power of attorney and a forged signature. Additional unauthorized withdrawals, balance transfers, and associated fees totaling $228,200. Judge Callahan's hand came up. Stop. the bailiff stopped. The judge stared at the page. Then he removed his reading glasses, slowly, deliberately, and set them on the bench. He looked at Gerald Wallace. He looked at Donna Wallace. He looked at Craig Delmore, whose face had drained to the color of the courtroom walls. "Get security in here," Judge Callahan said. Not a shout. Worse. The calm, iron voice of a man who had just discovered he was being used. "Now!" Gerald stood up. The chair scraped the floor. That is a misunderstanding, Your Honor. I am her father." "Mr. Wallace, sit down." Two security officers entered through the side door and stationed themselves near the exit. Gerald sat. His hands were trembling, the same hands that had tapped the table in triumph 5 minutes ago. Donna's face was white, her mouth slightly open, the handkerchief forgotten on the floor. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I sat with my hands on my lap and let the paper do what paper does best. It told the truth. The courtroom door opened again. Not security this time. Ethan walked in wearing a college hoodie and jeans, a backpack over one shoulder, a 20-year-old kid who looked like he'd ridden a bus through the night to get here, because he had. His eyes found mine first. I gave him the smallest nod I could manage without breaking. Rachel stood. "Your Honor, we have one additional witness. Ethan Wallace, 20 years of age, the petitioner's son." Gerald spun in his chair. "Ethan, what are you—" He caught himself, glanced at the judge, lowered his voice. "What are you doing here?" Ethan didn't answer his father. He walked to the witness stand, sat down, and looked directly at Judge Callahan. "Your Honor, 1 week ago, I overheard my father speaking by phone with his attorney from the garage of our family home. I was in the adjacent kitchen. He didn't know I was present." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket, a printed transcript. "My father stated, and I'm quoting, 'The girls probably got 30, 40 grand in the bank. That's enough to cover a few months of payments. Once the conservatorship goes through, I sell her car and the apartment lease, and we restructure.' He also referred to my sister as the girl and said, 'Just get me the signature. She's not going to fight it. She doesn't have it in her.'" Ethan looked at Gerald for the first time. "Dad didn't file this petition because he's worried about Thea. He filed it because he's broke, and he thought she was an easy target." Gerald lunged forward in his seat. "Ethan, you're betraying your family." Judge Callahan's gavel hit the bench like a gunshot. "Mr. Wallace, one more word and I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand me?" Gerald's mouth opened, closed. He sat back. His hands gripped the armrests. The Rolex, the fake one, caught the fluorescent light one last time. Ethan, still on the stand, turned to me. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner, Thea." I pressed my lips together. I couldn't speak. But I held his gaze, and I hoped he understood that there was nothing in the world to forgive. Judge Callahan removed his glasses again. He placed them on the bench with the precision of a man who was choosing his next words very carefully. The courtroom was absolutely still. Security at the doors. Gerald locked in his chair. Donna motionless. Craig Delmore with his laptop closed and his hands in his lap, looking at a spot on the table like he wanted to disappear into it. "The court has heard sufficient evidence to render a determination on this matter." Judge Callahan's voice was measured, each word deliberate. "First, the petition for conservatorship over Thea L. Wallace is denied. There is no credible evidence, none, that the respondent lacks capacity for self-care or financial management. To the contrary, the evidence presented today demonstrates a level of financial competence and discipline that most adults in this courtroom, including this court, would find exceptional." He let that settle. Second, the psychological evaluation submitted by petitioners, authored by Dr. Howard Phelps, was prepared without any direct examination of the respondent. This court considers that document to be, at best, grossly negligent and, at worst, a deliberate attempt to mislead the court. I am referring Dr. Phelps' report to the State Medical Board for review. Gerald's jaw tightened. Third, and this is the matter that concerns me most. The judge leaned forward. The forensic audit attached to the respondent's disclosure presents prima facie evidence of identity theft, financial fraud, and the use of a revoked power of attorney to obtain credit in another person's name. These are not civil matters. These are criminal acts. He turned to the clerk. I am ordering the entire record of this proceeding, along with the forensic audit and all supporting documentation, to be transmitted to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. Back to Gerald and Donna. Mr. and Mrs. Wallace, you are not to leave this county until further notice. Do you understand? Gerald didn't answer. Donna nodded, barely. The gavel came down. This hearing is concluded. The sound echoed off the wood-paneled walls and the high ceiling and the fluorescent lights that buzzed on, indifferent, the way systems do, continuing to function regardless of who just got exposed beneath them. Gerald was staring at his shoes, expensive, polished, bought for a courtroom performance that had just turned into a crime scene. I had dreamed of what this moment would feel like. The truth is, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 11 years. If you've made it this far, thank you, genuinely. This story isn't over yet. What happens after the gavel drops when the courtroom empties and you're standing in a hallway with the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? That's the part I never thought I'd have the courage to tell. If you know someone who's going through something like this, share this story with them. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step. Stay with me. We're almost there. The hallway outside Department 7 had granite floors that made every footstep echo. I was walking toward the exit with Rachel on my left, and Ethan 2 steps behind when I heard him. Thea, Gerald, coming up fast, Donna trailing behind him, Craig Delmore already splitting off toward the elevators without looking back. Gerald's suit jacket was unbuttoned, his tie loosened, the controlled appearance from an hour ago crumbling in real time. You need to drop this. The referral to the DA, you tell your lawyer to pull it back. I am your father. A security officer stepped forward. Rachel positioned herself between Gerald and me without raising her voice. Mr. Wallace, my client is under no obligation to speak with you. I strongly advise you to maintain distance. Gerald ignored her. His eyes were on me, not angry now, not commanding, desperate. It was the first time in my life I'd seen Gerald Wallace look desperate, and it should have given me satisfaction, but instead, it just made me tired. He turned to Ethan. Son, you know they manipulated you. Your sister. Dad. Ethan's voice was quiet but final. Stop. Nobody manipulated me. You did all of this yourself. Donna reached for my arm. Her fingers grazed my sleeve, cold, shaking. Thea, please, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I stopped walking, turned to face her, and I said the truest thing I'd ever said to my mother. Mom, your apology doesn't erase $341,000 in unauthorized transactions on my name. You need to talk to a lawyer now, not to me. I turned back around, flat shoes on granite, Rachel beside me, Ethan behind me, the glass doors of the courthouse ahead, afternoon light pouring through them like something opening. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me I needed anymore. The system moved at its own pace after that, slowly, and then all at once. 2 weeks after the hearing, the district attorney's office opened a formal investigation. Gerald was charged with 3 counts: identity theft, a felony in our state, financial fraud, and filing fraudulent documents with the court. Donna was charged as an accessory. Dr. Howard Phelps received notification from the State Medical Board that his license was under review for issuing a clinical evaluation without direct patient examination. I never learned the outcome, but Rachel told me his practice website went offline the following month. Craig Delmore didn't face criminal charges, but the State Bar Association opened an ethics inquiry into whether he had exercised due diligence in verifying the evidence he presented. Rachel said that in her experience, that kind of inquiry didn't end careers, but it followed them. Gerald's contractor license, already suspended during the bankruptcy, was permanently revoked once the felony charges were filed. Even if he beat the criminal case, the licensing board had its own standards, and a fraud indictment exceeded them. The HELOC, the credit cards, the forged applications, all of it was documented, contested, and unwound. Every fraudulent account was closed. Every unauthorized charge was reversed. My credit report was cleaned, line by line, like scrubbing graffiti off a wall someone else vandalized. The total stolen, $341,600. Every dollar accounted for and ordered returned by the court. People have asked me whether I pushed for the maximum penalty. I didn't. I didn't ask for punitive damages. I didn't seek a public statement or a media interview. I asked for exactly two things: the return of what was taken and the removal of every fraudulent mark from my financial record. That's it. I didn't need their punishment. I needed my name back, clean, intact, and mine. Rachel filed the restraining order the week after the DA's charges were announced. The court granted it without a hearing. The judge reviewed the record from the conservatorship case and signed off the same day. 500 feet. No direct contact, no indirect contact, no communication through third parties. A clear, legal, enforceable line drawn on paper, the kind of document I'd spent my career filing for other people and never imagined I'd need for myself. I changed my locks, changed my phone number, placed a credit freeze on all 3 bureaus, the digital equivalent of bolting every door and window and then welding them shut. Nobody opens anything in my name without my explicit, verified in-person authorization, ever again. Monday morning, I walked into the county records office at 7:58 a.m. Same desk, same Folgers mug, same fluorescent lights. Margaret Holt was already there. She was always there first, a holdover from her CPA days. But this morning, instead of her usual wave, she was standing at my desk with a cup of espresso from the little machine she kept in the break room. I read about the hearing, she said. She didn't ask for details. Margaret was the kind of person who understood that the best thing you can offer someone after a war is normalcy. Are you all right? I took the cup. It was warm. The espresso was dark and slightly bitter, nothing like the Folgers I'd been drinking for 7 years. A small ceremony. A quiet acknowledgement that something had changed. I'm all right, I said. First time in a long time. Margaret nodded, patted my shoulder once, firmly, the way she did everything, and went back to her desk. I sat down, opened my screen. Property transfers, tax records, filings. The ordinary machinery of a county office humming along unchanged. A restraining order isn't punishment. It's not revenge. It's a statement in legal language that says, this is the line, and you put yourself on the other side of it. I didn't draw the line out of hatred. I drew it because I finally understood that love without boundaries isn't love, it's access. Ethan came to my apartment for the first time the Saturday after the hearing. He stood in the doorway of my 450-square-foot studio, backpack over his shoulder, and looked around with an expression caught somewhere between amusement and disbelief. You live here? You own 3 other houses and you live here? The rent is $810. He laughed. Actually laughed. A real one, not the careful, cautious kind he'd learned to produce in Gerald's house. He dropped his backpack by the door and sat on the floor because there was only one chair and I was already in it. I'm sorry, he said, quieter now. I knew what he was like, for years. And I didn't say anything until you were 17, then 18, then 19, and in your first year of college, trying to survive on a scholarship and dining hall food. That wasn't your fight, Ethan. It was never your fight. I made it my fight. And that was the bravest thing anyone in this family has done in a long time. We ordered pizza, ate it on the floor with our backs against the wall, paper plates on our laps, 2 glasses of water from the tap. No wine, no ceremony, no pretense. The window was open and the evening air came through with the sound of traffic and a neighbor's radio. Thea? Yeah. Will you teach me about investing? I looked at him. 20 years old, coffee stain on his hoodie, pizza sauce on his thumb. My little brother who'd ridden a bus through the night to sit in a courtroom and tell the truth about his own father. Step 1. Open a Vanguard account. Step 2. Never ever tell Dad. He grinned. I grinned back. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, my apartment didn't feel small. It felt exactly the right size. 6 months later, Gerald accepted a plea deal. 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution of $341,600 payable in structured installments. Donna received a lighter sentence, probation and cooperation credit for assisting the investigation. Neither of them went to prison. The system processed them the way the system processes first-time, non-violent offenders, firmly but without theatrical cruelty. The four-bedroom house was foreclosed and sold at auction. Gerald and Donna moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a town 30 miles away. I know this not because I looked for them, but because Ethan mentioned it once, briefly, and then changed the subject. I don't call them. They don't call me. Not because of the restraining order, that's just the legal boundary. The real boundary is older and deeper, and was built over 33 years of being told I wasn't enough. At work, I was promoted. Senior Records Analyst, a title that came with a small raise and a new nameplate on my desk. I put it next to the framed receipt from my last student loan payment. 2 documents, side by side. One that marked the end of a debt, one that marked the beginning of being seen. I'm still in the studio, but for the first time, I've been looking at houses, not for investment, not for rental income. For me. A place I'd actually live in, with a kitchen big enough to cook a real meal, and a yard where I could put a chair and sit in the sun and not owe anyone an explanation for how I spend my time. Someone asked me recently if I've forgiven my parents. I thought about it for a long time. What I said was, forgiveness is my business, consequences are the court's, and boundaries belong to both of us. So that's the story. I'm Thea Wallace, 33 years old, 34 next month actually, county records analyst, owner of a Honda Civic with 112,000 miles, a studio apartment I chose, 3 rental properties I earned, and a Vanguard account I've been feeding since I was 22 years old. My father called me the girl who sorts paper. He wasn't wrong. I spent 11 years sorting paper, property deeds, lien certificates, foreclosure filings, financial records. I learned the language of ownership and loss by watching it pass through my hands, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And somewhere along the way, the paper taught me something Gerald Wallace never intended, that the quietest person in the room can build the most. I didn't do any of it to prove him wrong. That's the part people get confused about. I did it because it was mine. Every dollar, every hour of weekend renovation, every quarterly Vanguard statement, mine. Built in silence, maintained in discipline, and defended in a courtroom when the people who should have been proud of me tried to take it instead. I think about that hearing sometimes. The sound of the bailiff's voice reading numbers into the record, the moment the fluorescent lights seemed brighter than they'd been all morning, the way Gerald's fingers finally stopped tapping the table. I don't think about it with satisfaction. I think about it with a kind of exhausted clarity. The clarity you feel when you've carried something heavy for a very long time, and then you set it down and realize your hands are shaking. Not because you're weak, but because you were strong for longer than you knew. I sort paper, I keep records, I pay attention to the fine print, and I built my life on my own terms, every single page of it. That's my story. Thank you for staying until the end. If this reached something inside you, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and share. Not for the numbers, because somewhere out there, someone is sitting alone right now, wondering if they're strong enough to draw the line. Let them know the answer is yes. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, check the description below. There's another one waiting for you. I'll see you there.